Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
You held him to 20 points, man. You gave us a chance at the end. But I got 3 words for you. You like that?
Yeah, let's let Kirk Cousins fire us up on this Monday here. 2 weeks and a couple of days until Vikings training camp commences. And I think, it's been about a week since we've last done a deep dive into Kirk Cousins on this show. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready.
Yeah, you've done the research. Let's hear it.
Research here. Well,
let's hear what we got.
So this is Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, Declan Goff, our executive producer. Daily Vikings entertainment. And remember, the mission statement for the show is we want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die. So if it ever feels like we're being too negative or dumping too much on the coach or the quarterback, well, it's because we have high sports standards. And as Judd talked about on Mackey and Judd earlier today, which you can also find anywhere you find podcasts, we're not going to be gaslit as Minnesota sports fans. Okay, we demand excellence. So we set a high bar.
Damn right.
So, by the way, TCL is the presenting sponsor of this show too. Enjoy more of what you love with TCL. So let's set this up. Last week, I can't remember if I think this came from like if it was like a question in the YouTube comment sections, but there was a debate about our use of the word garbage time as it pertains to Kirk Cousins, and specifically when the Vikings are 1-5 and Kirk is putting up these ridiculous numbers after they're 1-5, and it's we talked about how the pressure's kind of off at that point. The expectations have been lowered. You're not going to get benched because Sean Mannion's your backup, and so once it's all free and easy, and now that there's really nothing to lose anymore, now you play well. So the question that we set out to answer here in this episode is Kirk Cousins a garbage time quarterback? Does he build up his wealth of stats and value exclusively in garbage time? And so I want to set this up by just pointing out that you can find any statistic, any prominent statistic, passer rating, completion percentage, yards per game. There's all kinds of different numbers that will show you that he is actually on par statistically with some Hall of Fame quarterbacks. He's 3rd all-time in completion percentage. He's 6th all-time in passer rating. Only Rodgers, Wilson, Breeze, Mahomes, and Watson are better. He's 15th all-time in yards per attempt, ahead of guys like Brady and Peyton Manning and Breeze. All of the other quarterbacks that are mentioned here in and around Kirk Cousins in these quarterback stats are Super Bowl champions and have records well above 500, except for maybe like Deshaun Watson is up there in the passer rating rankings, and he hasn't done anything in terms of Super Bowl or anything. But Kirk Cousins' teams, on the other hand, are exactly 500, over 100-plus career starts. They've never gone deep in the playoffs. None of his teams ever, in 10 years as a starting quarterback, have ever gone deep in the playoffs. And the Vikings, the last 3 years, are actually 5-19 when they play winning teams when Kirk Cousins is their starting quarterback. So that's sort of the backdrop of how is it possible that Kirk puts up these like Hall of Fame type numbers in these passer rating, completion percentage, these yards per attempt. Like, how is he putting up Hall of Fame numbers, and yet his teams don't win more games? He's either the unluckiest dude of all time and just has had terrible coaching and defense and offensive weapons, and just like for 10 years he's been holding it all together with his greatness just to get those teams to 500, right? Or there's something missing from his numbers. There's an untold story in there somewhere that doesn't link his numbers to more team wins like it does for some of these other quarterbacks. And so that's the backdrop as we dive into Kirk Cousins' garbage time quarterback. Before I get into some of the numbers and the data, Judd, from just an eye test perspective, you've been covering football for a long time. You've been watching football for a long time. What do your eyes tell you about Kirk Cousins as it pertains to the garbage quarterback question?
Garbage time. So how he does in garbage time?
Do you think he's built his numbers and career off of like meaningless situations?
Built his career off of meaningless situations is probably too strong. But do I think he thrives when the pressure is nullified by the circumstances? The answer is absolutely yes. And I mean, Kirk Cousins to me defines the term of box score quarterback. I mean, if I was a fantasy football player, I'd love this guy because he throws for yards, high completion percentage, which you referred to. He throws for touchdowns. But I mean, let's take in a nutshell. So let's subtract the fact that the Vikings defense was not good last year. And let's just talk about what Kirk could control, okay? Because that's fair. So I'm not even saying, oh, man, he should have single-handedly taken a team that had a lousy defense, which the 2020 Vikings did, and led them to several wins. But let's look at week 1 of last year, the Green Bay game, when the Vikings were essentially blown out of that game. And what happened? Kirk led them back with a lot of meaningless yards and points. The points meant nothing. At that point, you might as well lose by 40. Your team, you're done. Let's look at the Titans game when Kirk had a chance at the end, no matter what the circumstances were, to try and drive the team far enough down the field to kick a field goal. Not saying he didn't have to score a touchdown. He had to get them. He had to find a way. And that's what I want my quarterback to do. Can you find a way? And he collapsed. They did nothing. They went nowhere. They went backwards, if I recall correctly. And then the third game, the Falcons game. You're 1-4. You're going into the bye. Literally a save your season game. And in fact, I believe in retrospect, because he did bounce back once the pressure sort of came off him, the Vikings in the new playoff format ended up 1 win short of a playoff spot, right? So that Falcons game was the must win. You're off to a bad start, but going into the bye, save your season. And his first pass was picked off, and he played an absolutely terrible game in which I'm convinced if they had a real backup quarterback, he would have probably been benched, okay? So those are just 3 examples of if you watch him play and you watch this team play, and it gives me no satisfaction to say this, that has colored my impression of Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm. So here's what the data tells you, all right? So I have a new stance on Kirk Cousins based on, I would say, like 3 hours of like deep diving into some of the data last night. Stathead.com. There's some great resources out there. Pro Football Focus, obviously, but I think it's incorrect to say that he's a garbage time quarterback or that he racks up most of his stats in garbage time. I think the most accurate statement would be Kirk Cousins performs very poorly in fourth quarter comeback situations relative to the rest of his career. And you mentioned the Tennessee Titans game or the Seahawks game. Some of that is like Alex Madison, dude. You got to find 1 yard on that run, and all of a sudden then Kirk looks better. So there's definitely other factors involved here. But the biggest thing that separates him from the rest of the top quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that you compare him to, career passer rating and career completion percentage and all these things, right? The thing that separates him from Breeze and Brady and Mahomes and Russell Wilson is how well those guys perform and maintain that high level of performance, if not get better, when all the chips are on the table and you're down by a touchdown last 5 minutes of a game, right? And so I set out to answer that question first last night, cocktail in hand.
Good for you.
Vikings YouTube videos.
The numbers are all wrong.
Yeah.
The numbers are all wildly off.
I can't read my writing anymore.
Hey, Harry, come here. Look at these cousin stats. Those aren't cousin stats. They're Joe Namath. Who cares?
So how well does Kirk play when trailing late in a close game? So I define that by, so these are fourth quarter comeback situations where your quarterback is paid more money to help bail out the rest of your team, right? Like, I don't know what happened in the first 55 minutes of this game that led us to here, but we're down by 8. You got the ball in your hands, and we need you right now. Or, hey, the defense has been terrible today, and so that's why we're down by 4 points with a minute and a half to go. No timeouts. Ball's in your hands. Like, this is where Pat Mahomes, this is where Tom Brady, like, that's why they're paid more money, to rise above circumstances, right?
Yep.
So fourth quarter overtime, inside 6 minutes, and trailing by 2 scores or less. So the game is still within reach. You've still got the 2-minute warning. Presumably you still have timeouts, and you need to score. Now, your offense needs to score. In these situations, in his 10-year career, Kirk Cousins has a 73.7 passer rating. And by the way, this is almost 400 attempts. This isn't like a small sample size thing here. That's 46th among qualified quarterbacks. Late, trailing, need a comeback, balls in your hands, 16 touchdowns, 16 interceptions in his career. In terms of passer rating and where that ranks, he's behind Mike Glennon, Daniel Jones, Mitch Trubisky, Josh Rosen, Trevor Siemian, Andy Dalton, Josh Freeman, and Christian Ponder. Let that sink in for a second. So he's terrible late, close. You're trailing. Need you to step up, rise above maybe a rickety offensive line. Need you to sort of figure out a way to get that ball 75 yards down the field into the end zone or into field goal range. In all other scenarios, okay, so if we strip out how bad he is in those late, close, fourth quarter comeback situations, in all other scenarios, Kirk's career passer rating is 100.6, which would rank 5th all-time of all quarterbacks to ever play the game. So it's not that he's only good in garbage time. It's that he's really bad when the game is on the line and his team is trailing inside 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, and you got to have a score. When his teams are leading, or it's tied and it's early in the fourth, or it's the third, or it's the second quarter, all these other, he's a good quarterback. He has limitations. He's not really mobile, which is part of the reason why he's not as good late in games. But that is there's more here, but my biggest takeaway is it's not correct to say that he's just a garbage time quarterback. It's that the biggest moments where you need him and need any quarterback, which is, hey, Pat Mahomes, can you please bail us out? We're down by 9 points with 6 minutes to go, and we need a touchdown now, and then we need another one. Or, hey, Tom Brady, we're down by 3. We got to get into field goal range here. We have no timeouts, and there's 50 seconds left. We just really need you to fix this right now. He can't fix it, and other great quarterbacks can. So that's my main takeaway.
And that doesn't surprise you one bit. Like, that is your takeaway from your statistical analysis that you did with a few cocktails in hand last night. So I'm margin for error, a few percentage points. Your takeaway is exactly what I would have expected. Which is, and I mean, that reverts back to the thing that we've talked about forever, at least in Kirk's time here, which is he needs the conditions to be right. The worse the conditions become, the more he struggles to make up for those conditions. And so, and yeah, it's not like he is accumulating all his stats in garbage time. It just feels like the more that you put him in situations where the pressure is reduced, the more he thrives, which is if you're down by 21, the pressure's gone. Free and easy, right? Free and easy. Go. That Green Bay defense is in a prevent mode right now, and so you can complete passes. Titans game, it's a tight game. Oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here? Okay, the blocking's breaking down. What you found out is exactly what I would have expected. And that's not to say that this guy only accumulates stats in garbage time. It is to say that when the going gets extremely tough, look, I can give you, I think on one hand, in Kirk's time here, 3 years now, I think I can give you on one hand the amount of memorable, big game type of throws at any point that he's made, like big throws, right? Philadelphia year one, he made that pass to Thielen, which was a great pass. And that's the type of pass he can make. And I was like, wow, that's really impressive. The Vikings won that game in part because of Kirk. Kudos, dude. It's your first year here. Can we expect this? The answer is no. The Denver game. And by the way, being trailing in that game like the Vikings did was inexcusable. But nonetheless, you know what? Kirk brought them back. It was a nice comeback. Diggs, who I thought was the catalyst for the comeback, made that big deep ball catch from Kirk. Yeah. Again, another throw. And another throw also, Kirk can make.
I'm so sick of hearing about the Denver game. Do you think some of these other quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, do those fans even talk about, this one time, right. 3 years ago against that bad team in the regular season, get lost. No one cares.
This is my point, though. My point is these are on one hand. The Saints playoff game, the pass to Thielen was a huge pass. Now the Vikings also screwed that game up, but I will give Kirk credit. He made a big throw at a crucial moment, which then set up his touchdown pass to Kyle, and so he gets credit for that too. And I'm trying to think of two more big throws that he's made when I've considered the pressure to basically be solely on him. So it's not a Dalvin bailout or something like that.
And here's another way to look at this. So I've just separated his career into two bins, right? There's, trailing late in the fourth quarter, need you to help us. Just need you to bail us out. And then there's all of the other scenarios, leading, trailing, tied, all of the other quarters, early in the fourth quarter, etc. Well, what's the one weapon that gets taken away from Kirk late in games, trailing, defense knows you're going to pass? Play action. In his career, Kirk Cousins' play action passer rating is like 25 or 30 points higher than when he's not running play action. Now, he's not a disaster when he's not running play action, but he is, if you just rank quarterbacks the last 3 or 4 years based on how good they are running play action, he's one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL, if not sometimes like first or second. He's a really, really good play action quarterback. But when that structure and that deception gets taken away and it's just you and a defense with its ears pinned back, and in fairness, a rickety offensive line for the majority of his time with the Vikings, which is not helping him. But all of that sort of factors in. Russell Wilson, he's going to be better at evading interior pressure because he can use his mobility to get away from a bad offensive line, right? So when you take away the play action late in games, it's a huge, huge struggle for Kirk, and that's why he's been so bad in those 10 years. 73.7 passer rating, worse than Josh Freeman, Mike Glennon, Trevor Siemian, Josh Rosen, Christian Ponder. Oof.
And it's not surprising. I mean, that's the thing I come back to. Your research basically confirms what we have seen. And the other thing with Kirk, too, and I don't mean this to be a pile on Kirk, but the other thing with Kirk, when you talk about, well, I mean, look, he's with Brady and Mahomes and blah, blah, blah. Think about it this way. It's very simple. How do you overcome the moments that can define you? And by that, I mean bad moments. Tom Brady in Chicago in a primetime game last season forgot the downs. That's incredibly embarrassing. That's inexcusable. That if Kirk did the same thing, we would rip him for it and he would deserve it. But guess what Tom did? He won a Super Bowl. So nobody's talking about, you remember when Brady forgot the downs? Mahomes, Wilson, Brady, any list of great quarterbacks, they screw up. But they overcome it. And they usually make the playoffs, and they usually have a slew of plays where you're like, well, yeah, he screwed that up, but he made these 5 great plays, right?
Well,
so quickly, the year that Kirk turned around and threw the ball backwards in Seattle, did the Vikings win a Super Bowl that year? Did they do something where we eventually could laugh and be like, yeah, Kirk threw the ball backwards in Seattle, but he won the Super Bowl or he got to the NFC title game? He did not. So how do you overcome the moments that define you? And if you don't, they're going to be held against you.
Some guys just have a hard time when the pressure is cranked up, when the heat is turned on. In order to stay cool, calm, and collected, I'd recommend a pair of Chill Boys for our guy, Kirk Cousins. The most comfortable boxer briefs, and I am rocking them right now, I have ever worn. Give me each one word to describe how you guys feel when you strap on a pair of Chill Boys during the summertime especially.
Comfortable. No garbage time here. Comfortable. Absolutely comfortable in my pair of Chill Boys, dude. Comfortable.
No such thing as garbage time for Chill Boys.
No such thing as garbage time.
Liberated. It's liberating. My Chill Boys. I'm 51. I have never, ever found a pair of underwear that are as liberating and comfortable, almost to the point where I don't feel like I'm wearing them, but I am as Chill Boys.
Yeah. Tell you what, Chill Boys, Minnesota-based company, and they are passionate about one thing, our comfort. Chillboys.com. So you can, I just ordered, I mean, come on. I've literally gotten rid of all of my other boxer briefs. I just ordered 3 more of the gray boxer briefs. Just can't get enough of these things.
What I am so impressed by is I've never been a briefs person. I despise briefs. I don't like being tucked in down there. And these are like the hybrid version of both boxers and briefs.
Exactly.
And now my mind is completely blown on what should be comfortable down there.
Dude, trust us. Chillboys.com.
They've redefined what you know as far as underwear goes.
Another garbage time. I like that. It's a good tagline there. Another garbage time question. So people have given us flack about hey, 1-5, you can't call everything after 1-5 garbage time. And in fact, isn't the pressure cranked up even more because maybe your job's on the line, maybe everyone's jobs are on the line. What is your response to because the best stretch of Kirk Cousins' entire career came after the 1-5 start for the next 2.5 months. That's the best football he's ever played. His passer rating, and I get that we're using passer rating here. It's not the be-all, end-all evaluation of a quarterback, but just like a general sort of across 40 years of NFL football, he had a 113.6 passer rating with 24 touchdowns, 3 picks after the 1-5 start last year. So when people say, no, you can't call all of that garbage time, what is your response, Judd?
The last 2 years, Kirk has a lot of things going on upstairs, I think, as far as mentally putting pressure on himself or reducing said pressure and thriving. My response is 1-5 last year. The pressure is gone in his mind because people have given up on him. He starts the season with the Vikings, and he'll start 2021 the same way. Big expectations, rightfully so. Highly paid quarterback. You should be competitive with the best. And I don't know why, but that seems to get to Kirk. And I'll go back to 2019 as well. I believe the Vikings were 2-2, so it was not a disaster. But when did Kirk completely thrive? And I believe he was the NFC Offensive Player of the Month for, was it October? After the Vikings had that disastrous game where Diggs walked out in Chicago. In Kirk's mind, somehow it reduces the pressure when people are like, Kirk Cousins might get benched. This is really it. He's not playing well. Is Kirk Cousins a complete bust? He justifies that in his mind as, okay, now the pressure's gone because the expectation, at least, has been reduced a lot. Now I'm going to show them. So that's my comeback. And by the way, when you put yourself behind the 8 ball, like the Vikings did and like Kirk did last year, the pressure is gone. Nobody came back. They traded Ngakoue at the bye week. Nobody, when they came back, thought that they could beat Green Bay. Nobody expected a damn thing. We thought that they were done. There are some of us who think that they would have been better off riding it out and losing games to get a higher draft pick. That's not the conversation here. The conversation is how Kirk is mentally wired. And the last 2 years to me have shown that he's very comfortable when the expectations are yanked away and people are like, oh, clearly he's disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're sitting in a close game against whoever it may be, Carolina, Green Bay, although they limited him to about 6 pass attempts in that Green Bay game out of the bye week, if I remember right, or I think it was like under 20.
It was Dalvin game.
There's pressure within games to perform well, but ultimately the first 6 games matter too. So, in fact, they matter more because you got to get off to a hot start and you got to set your season up right so that you can continue to and also so you can absorb a 2-game losing streak later on and not have it derail your playoff chances. So, yeah, maybe it's too aggressive to call it all garbage time, but it's sort of pressure is off, nothing to lose, and there's no rookie quarterback waiting to take your job time, and he tends to thrive in those situations. By the way, ESPN.com, our old friend Jeremy Fowler used to cover the Vikings for the Pioneer Press like 10 years ago, and he talked to 50 executives, coaches, and players around the NFL and put together these like composite rankings at each position, the top 10 players at each position. And this morning he unveiled the quarterback list. So this is according to people in the game who are the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. Pat Mahomes is number 1. Highest ranking 1, lowest ranking 3. So somebody literally had Pat Mahomes ranked 3rd, which is amazing to me.
They should probably lose their job.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers number 2, I should say.
Yep.
Tom Brady number 3, Russell Wilson number 4, Josh Allen number 5, Matt Stafford 6th.
It's high right now. People are high on Matt Stafford training Rams.
National Football League MVP, write that down.
Including myself.
I think he's going to have a huge year. I think being out of Detroit is going to be enormous, being with McVay.
Dak Prescott number 7. That's a little aggressive.
That's a little high.
By the way, Dak Prescott showed up around the same range as Kirk Cousins in a lot of these late fourth quarter comeback situations. So did my guy Phillip Rivers, who throws a lot of interceptions in those situations.
Yeah, I'm not sure how high on... I like Dak Prescott. I don't know how high on him I actually am these days.
He looks the part. Sometimes
right, that's what I was going to say. I take him. I'm just curious.
Lamar Jackson, number 8. Justin Herbert, number 9. Kyler Murray, number 10. And then there's quarterbacks also receiving votes. Matt Ryan, Derek Carr, Ben Roethlisberger, Ryan Tannehill, Joe Burrow, and then Kirk Cousins. One NFC exec says, quote, he's a good player. He's easy to nitpick, but he's productive and great for that system. And I agree. For a play action system, in fact, be careful what we wish for to some extent, wanting there to be more of a pass-centric approach to this offense. I think we have to sort of put a side note on that for me personally and say more pass-centric, but within the frame of what Kirk Cousins is good at. So I would say maybe like 3 more play-action attempts per game, something like that. Because if you're just going to have him stand back there and shotgun and drop back, like DeFilippo style,
yeah,
it's
didn't work out too well.
Yeah, and no, maybe it's different now. Maybe now that he's had a few more years under his belt, like when he came here, he only had 3 years as a full-time starter under his belt. So maybe now that he has 6, maybe you could get away with some of that stuff more. But I don't know. So yeah, he's a good player. The executive said he's easy to nitpick, but he's productive and great for that system.
And by the way, too, his fantasy quarterback rankings, he was actually more of a tier 1 starting quarterback in Washington. Since he's arrived in Minnesota, this is according to Pro Football Reference, which I believe just takes ESPN's like standard format. So I think they just rank it on this score. But he's in his 3 seasons, he's finished 13th, 15th, 11th among NFL quarterbacks, which honestly, and I haven't played fantasy football in 6 years, but if you're ranking him there, that's like a fringe tier 1 starting quarterback for fantasy football because you're basically the 11th or 12th best fantasy football quarterback. He's good. Not saying it's like not worth starting over, but he hasn't necessarily been as high as he is, even those garbage time situations. He's basically been a tier 2 starting quarterback for fantasy football.
So would you guys, just to bring this conversation full circle, would you guys would you rather sacrifice some productivity, 90% of the time, or would you rather have an unbelievable late-game comeback quarterback for the 10% of the time that those snaps take up? Because so Kirk Cousins in late fourth quarter comeback situations, which take up about 10% of his career,
Right.
in terms of pass attempts,
Right.
he's one of the worst in the NFL among like regular starting quarterbacks. But for the other 90%, when given the right system and everything else, he's pretty damn good. Would you rather sacrifice some of that 90% to have an unbelievable late game guy like a Russell Wilson or somebody, or even Ryan Tannehill's been really good late in games the last couple of years too.
Yeah, it's been great in Tennessee.
But he might implode. He might implode early and cost you a game.
I would rather have door 2 because I think with the way that this league is structured now, and it feels like just from the eye test that there's so many close games now, fourth quarter type of games, that sacrificing that almost completely, which to your point, Kirk's stats do basically, isn't an option to me now. And you're also, keep in mind too, the Vikings are built on defense, which means that games are often going to be tight. And so, I do need Kirk to then step up and win games for me. And he's almost incapable of that. So I would sacrifice some of the statistical success that you see in the first 3 quarters for a guy who would have a fighting chance to keep games alive a little bit more in the fourth quarter, scramble around, find some guys, and win late games. Because it doesn't feel like there's going to be enough one-sided games in my favor to sacrifice that.
Dax, what about you? Would you sacrifice the 90% where he's really good for a much, much, much better late game comeback quarterback?
I probably would, just because number 1, too, that guy, I know Ryan Tannehill has gotten paid and he has a hefty contract as well, but also I probably aren't paying as much money for that player. I can build out my roster in a different way. So there are misconceptions about Kirk. I am surprised. Judd said, he said he's not surprised by where he ranks in those pass rating situations in the late game situation. If you're that bad, that is eye-opening to me. That is that. I didn't think he would be as bad as worse than Josh Freeman and other quarterbacks who you listed in that ranking. That is shocking. To me, that is absolutely shocking that he's that poor. But it does confirm what a lot of people think about Kirk Cousins in that, yeah, he's fine in these areas, but when the pressure is on, The dude melts every single time. Every time.
And then of course, well, yeah, but like if you gave him a better offensive line, that's the circular argument. It's like, well, yeah, if you gave anyone perfect circumstances, then
and if you didn't make as much, you could.
Why would I pay that guy to be the third highest quarterback in the NFL if he can't overcome some of these deficiencies that are caused by his contract to begin with? And now we're back to this is the Kirk Cousins cycle of discussion.
And your guards could be great if Kirk didn't make as much, and consequently, Joe Thuney could be yours because you could afford to sign him. So yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But in today's game, I think you need a guy that has the ability to win games late. I just do.
Yeah, someone who can run around, and that's why I'm so obsessed with the idea of some semblance of mobility. Right, the ability to, if something breaks down, think about. When you think about the great fourth quarter quarterbacks, and Tom Brady is a different breed because he's strictly a statue pocket passer, but he's also amazing at feeling pressure, adjusting his offensive line, understanding every little nuance and reading defenses better than any quarterback that's ever walked. But there's a lot of improvisational things that have to happen in the final minute or 90 seconds. How often do you see a fourth quarter comeback or Super Bowl highlights late in games, right, where it's just drop back 5 steps, 7 steps, perfect offensive line, throw a dart 6 times, 8 times, right? It's usually Montana rolling to his right, Elway scrambling away, Eli, getting away from someone and making a play. It's like it's football. Super Bowl winners and Hall of Fame quarterbacks are littered with improvisational, off-schedule success.
Absolutely.
And that is the thing that separates Kirk from the other guys that he ranks among with some of these stats.
But you have to be those guys, you have to be willing to embrace failure. The David Tyree pass, right? What was the percentage of that being completed? I mean, the man caught the ball on top of his helmet. But in that case, Eli knew he had to make the pass. I don't know. Kirk can always pull the trigger on that pass. Like there's sometimes I think because of how Kirk thinks, like Kirk wants to have things. And look, this is how God made Kirk. Okay. So this ain't changing, but Kirk wants to have things be as perfect as possible. And football and pro sports is defined by things probably being as chaotic as possible at times that matter the most.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. Real quick, we have a fun clip to play for you guys. Just speaking of Vikings quarterbacks or a future Vikings quarterback, we have a clip here in a second. But live racing is back at Brainerd International Raceway, July 16th through the 18th. It's the second annual Jed Kopp Memorial Race, so this upcoming weekend. And it's a full weekend of live racing. The Trans Am Series presented by Pirelli. Open wheel racing, bracket drag racing series, all kinds of fun things happening at Brainerd International Raceway. And by the way, the Trans Am Series has been a 50-year tradition at BIR. Ticket and camping packages available now at BIRMN.com, BIRMN.com. Also, a shout out to our friends at Federated. They've been helping us keep the lights on through a difficult year and a half. Both on Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily, and Federated helps keep the lights on at your business when times are tough. You want to make sure you have that guiding hand standing behind you and your business, trusted resources and people, and that's what Federated provides. Based in Owatonna, Minnesota, they are one of us, and you can find out more information about all the resources they can provide, whether it's the 7-Minute Safety Trainer, MyShield, you name it, federatedinsurance.com. And remember, at Federated, it's our business to protect yours. Let's hear from the future quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings talking about his favorite future target.
Yesterday, a longtime teammate of mine, playing with Adam Thielen and Alex Smith, was in my draft class, and Adam's become a good buddy over the years. This is what this event's all about. It's a lot of fun.
Aaron Rodgers and Adam Thielen, another celebrity golf event, yucking it up about what they're going to do to the NFC North in 2023, gentlemen.
What would you have given to have that conversation between Thielen and Rodgers bugged? Because you know they talked about it.
Do you think Rodgers is telling people?
Broached.
I don't know, man. I feel like so little information has gotten out that if he had been talking to people throughout the league, or
I don't think he's telling people. But there is no way that Thielen didn't say, "You thinking about it?"
But do you think, like, obviously Thielen asked that question, right? Hey,
yeah.
we
that's what I want to hear.
Right? I don't think Aaron is talking to anyone. I feel like he's been on his little self-discovery mission all off season, and there's none of the NFL insiders have any information on what's happening. You haven't heard a Schefter report. You haven't heard a Rappaport report. You've heard nothing for 3 months.
I bet there was a knowing glance exchanged when Thielen said to his buddy, "You should come wear purple. A couple of years from now, you should be wearing purple. We can ride off into the sunset together with a Lombardi in the back of the station wagon as we parade it down I-94. And Aaron said, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
I told you guys this on Mackey and Judd. I feel like it's such a complicated path. Like the Packers would never just send Rodgers to the Vikings. They're not going to cut him. If he ever doesn't play for Green Bay, he's either going to be retired or the Packers will have traded him for like 3 first-round picks. And so they'll trade him to an AFC team, the Broncos or the Raiders or somebody. He's under contract for 3 more years, I think through 2023. So he would have to either play out that contract and then come to the Vikings when he's like 41, which I'm fine with, or he'd have to be bad and they'd have to be done with him, and then he would come here as like a shell of himself and a broken man. I don't know if there's another scenario. I don't think there's a Brett Favre.
He could retire. They could renounce his rights and then unretire.
But haven't teams learned from that? That like Brett Favre tricking the Jets into, I'm totally retired, guys. You can totally renounce my rights. Nothing to see here. I'm just mowing my lawn down in Mississippi. That's right.
I'm just throwing it out there that a vindictive guy like Aaron Rodgers could find a way to try and circumvent the system a little bit, okay? Just throwing it out there. Joe Goody, Mark Murphy, more importantly, Matt LaFleur, and new Vikings coach Eric Bieniemy wouldn't kick a field goal down late in the playoff game.
I just have a hard time seeing him like put his tail between his legs and go. How does he go back to that training camp after everything that's been reported? Apparently, he's been sending like mocking texts to all of his friends on the team, making fun of Gutekunst and Mark Murphy. You know, I don't know how you just like go back to camp. And I don't think they're back. I don't think they're going to trade him at this point.
No. I would put my money right now on he probably sits out the season.
Amazing. Oh, Declan's got to write that down prediction on the board that I think has him showing up to training camp.
I am showing up. Yes, he just has to show up. Just show up, please.
I just don't see, with his ego, I don't see him putting his tail between his legs and doing that. Because he's rich enough to sort of thumb his nose at him.
Yeah.
If they trade him, wouldn't it make more sense at this point to wait until like the October trade deadline? So that, like, what incentive would they have to trade him now as opposed to like October 20th? Yeah, you wouldn't want to give him a full training camp with somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
If somebody wants to trade for him, they can trade for him. After week 8. Or something.
Yeah, because it's not like you would free up a bunch of salary cap room and make a big move right now. There's no one to sign. So, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
This is going to get, I think it's going to get deliciously ugly. Like, it's going to be great.
Here for it. 2 weeks from Vikings camp, from awkward beginning of Packers camp.
Absolutely.
Great. So, all right, thanks for hanging out with us today. Daily Vikings entertainment, even, yes, during these doldrum periods where there's nothing really happening. We always have things happening in our minds as it pertains to the Vikings. And you can find us on our YouTube channel, Purple Daily. Click that subscribe button or anywhere you find podcasts. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you guys tomorrow.